Hello everyone, I'm Private Hudson, and this is Cloud Chamber. Cloud Chamber is an interesting game, if you can call it one. It is basically a combination of Blair Witch Project documentary filming and Facebook. Cloud Chamber is a science fiction story that deals about a mysterious signal. An experiment goes wrong, and now we as the viewer are watching bits and pieces of this documentary in non-chronological order, trying to piece together the puzzle. The story is difficult to describe, and the ending of this interactive experience will still leave you completely puzzled. It is a story that has no definitive answer. Just about everything is open to interpretation, but the basic gist of it is, Kathleen is a daughter of brilliant scientist Gustav, who happens to be head of an extremely prestigious university. She's fascinated by the study of sound and is a big part of a research group that can capture sounds from space. These sounds may give us the answers to the Big Bang Theory or may even predict our own extinction. She comes across some sound known only as the signal, which might be the same thing her mother was studying before it drove her to insanity and then to her eventual death. She becomes obsessed with figuring out what this signal is. Her father reluctantly allows her to form a tiny team in a small lab to try to research it. She hires Tom, a documentary filmmaker, who's supposed to record everything. He also happens to be a realist who questions her every theory. Then there is Max, a researcher and, as silly as this sounds, a DJ who makes electro music using found sounds. As contrived as the last bit is for plot elements, it ends up working well within the story. The game begins in an interesting way, as it basically shows the ending first. Something goes wrong, Kathleen goes missing, Tom and Max upload the recorded footage for us to see and decipher.
The documentary you're about to enter isn't authorised anymore. I'm uploading it anyway. Some of it's raw, jumbled or unedited, but it's a living record of what's happened. I've tried to assemble all the records I have, but in the end, you're going to need to sort it and make sense of it yourself.
The developer Investigate North tout this as a massively multiplayer social game. We, as the player, go from data node to data node. Most of these show the documentary sequences recorded by Tom. Others show us scientific diagrams, writings by Tom and Kathleen about their mood and opinion of the experiment, old works by Kathleen's mother, as well as actual documentary footage about space, the sun, magnetic fields, and all that sort of thing. Looking at one note opens up the next one, and we go from chapter to chapter until we reach the end. The story has no definitive answer or a conclusion. Almost every conflict that occurs ends in ambiguity, and it is up to us as the viewer to come up with a conclusion. And since there is no definitive answer, all of our own answers, beliefs, and thoughts about what occurs throughout this wonderful story will all be subjective and will all be different. The social aspect of this game is that every single data node has a Facebook-like window to the side of it where users are encouraged to leave comments. There they can give their opinion on what this data node is supposed to mean, and leaves for mostly intellectual discussion back and forth between multiple users and multiple posts. This does play into the gameplay as well. Each chapter has a certain amount of locked nodes. These nodes can only be unlocked if people like your comments or respond to them. In my opinion, this is the game's biggest flaw. As I finish the story in 3.5 hours, I still have around 30 nodes that are locked. I commented on some data nodes, but not all, as I began seeing spoilers. Users who completed the story then began looking at older nodes, putting the pieces back together. I stopped looking at the comments at around the 4th chapter. Currently, I have 2 likes in 2 different chapters. I need at least 4 in each one to view the contents of that particular chapter's locked node. Personally, and this is just my opinion, when dealing with ambiguous material, the viewer should be given all access to it so they can have all the information that is available and be able to come up with their own conclusion. Completing the story and still having 30 or so locked nodes that have important information prevents me from coming up with a conclusion, especially since near the end of the journey, there were so many gaps in the story that I was certain the information that I needed to know was behind those nodes. Imagine watching Blade Runner, Total Recall, Inception, or other movies like that, and imagine watching them with 45 minutes of their footage deleted. That is how I felt after I completed the story. Now, I can understand why they use this mechanic. This is a social game after all. We're supposed to be motivated to communicate with each other, discuss our own theories about the signal and what truly occurs in the story, which in turn rewards us with access to even more information. The game motivates debate and intellectual discussion, but I don't want to sit there arguing for a week just so I can see more footage. Like I said, personally I do not like this mechanic as it doesn't mesh with my own intellectual thinking, but I can understand why they used it. With that said, I'm not even sure what other mechanic they could have used as a replacement. And if they did use something else, it would defeat the whole purpose of the social aspect of this game, which is debate and discussion, and would pretty much turn this into an ambiguous indie movie. Even though I don't like this mechanic, it didn't detract my enjoyment of this game. Personally, I loved it. The story is very well written, the acting is good. The actors they used aren't the most well known, but they have been in a variety of TV shows and movies. The footage itself is very grainy, shaky, and gritty, which is perfect for this independent documentary film style. There's also a lot of distortion in the footage as well. Whether it was tampered with, damaged, or distorted by the signal is for the viewer to decide. The soundtrack is equally amazing. Since the whole concept of the movie is extracting sound from space, they use known techno and electric artists that also use found sounds in their own music. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The story and characters are incredibly interesting, and even though I do not yet have access to all the information, I can still formulate my opinion on some of the events that occurred. Obviously, this game is not for everyone. The only gameplay that exists is making Facebook-like posts and clicking on the next node, so that will be boring to some. If you like a good science fiction story, or even if you enjoy visual novels, then I think it's worth checking out. I don't think it's worth a full $20 price tag, but be sure to pick it up if it's on sale. I always love it when developers try to innovate and create something new. Cloud Chamber is a breath of fresh air. Calling it a game may be a stretch to some, but regardless, it is an excellent interactive experience.